are live. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Talent Talks podcast. Today we're diving into the world of customer support and SaaS growth with none other than Thomas Bass. Thomas is a seasoned expert in customer success and retention with an impressive track record of scaling teams and systems for SaaS companies at every stage of growth. As the new founder of Success to Scale, he's helped companies reduce churn, increase LTV, and build support frameworks that actually work. From early stage startups to enterprise level strategies, Thomas has seen it all. Today, we'll explore the stages of customer support for SaaS companies, the hard truths of scaling, and of course, the role of outsourcing in building effective support systems. But first, let's get to know the man behind the expertise. Thomas, thank you very much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Doing great. And thanks for having me, Paul. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I know we talked a little bit further, and I knew that as soon as I talked to you, you're a very knowledgeable guy. So I knew that this would be like a really valuable experience for you and also for our audience here. But before we get into it, Thomas, I would love for you to kind of introduce yourself and what you do in your own words.
Yeah, sure. So Thomas Bass, I'm known more colloquially as T Bass. I've never really been the first Thomas at a company, so I never got to choose my first name, it felt like. So always gone by T Bass. But I've been in the B2B SaaS world for over a decade. I've been in customer success, customer support roles for that entire time. Really focused on being kind of like the early stage helper and really helping get from that startup stage to that scale up stage. So that's really where I've cut my teeth. I've been CSM number one at various departments. I grew that department to 16 CSMs globally. I've been a starter on a couple different types of SaaS tools as well. So whether it's integrations tech, MarTech, FinTech. So really got a lot of different experiences across the technology world. So it's always nice to see like the slight differences between industries in terms of like who they're servicing and how they're servicing their end users.
And I'm sure we're going to dive deep into that. So let's start with something simple. Thomas, what drew you into the world of customer support and SaaS in the first place? Was it passion, circumstance, a bit of both?
It was a little bit of both. It was, I graduated from grad school. I was looking to get a job working in the government, and my buddy was working at a SaaS company at that point. And he said, while you're looking, I can get you into the support team here. And then I realized you can make way more money in the private sector than you can in the public sector. So that made the choice real easy after that. I just fell backwards into, at that time, they called them client advocates. So it was kind of like dedicated account managers type of roles. And then they blew that up about 3 months in. They said, hey, pick a role, customer success or customer support. I went with customer success, and 12 years later, here I am still in customer success.
Well, there's still plenty of time for you to grow and for you to try out many new avenues, I'm sure, as you will. So I know you've helped SaaS companies build scalable systems for customer success. So what was like the first big win in your career that made you realize like, I'm good at this?
Yeah, I think it's back when I worked at a customer data platform integrations tech company, and I was responsible for customer support, customer success, and implementation. So really anything post-contract signing. And at that point, their GRR was okay on a good day, and their NRR was actually sub 100%.
And just so, sorry, 1 second. Just so for people that don't know, what's GRR?
Yeah, GRR is a gross revenue retention. So how are you doing it? Keeping the dollars you already have on board. And it was okay. And then their NRR, which is net revenue retention, you'll sometimes hear that as NDR or net dollar retention. That's basically how well you do with keeping your customers as well as cross-selling and upselling that same customer cohort. So NRR or NDR, you always want over 100%, but at this company, it was actually sub 100%. And so within a year, I actually got it turned around, and we were cruising at 110 right before we made the merger and acquisition. So getting from sub 100 to over 100% NRR is a big deal, especially if you're VC or PE backed. It's very, very difficult to raise your next round of funding if you don't actually have solid GRR and over 100% NRR. It's nobody really wants to invest you at that point. So it's super important for those SaaS companies to get that turned around. And the first time I did that on my own, I was like, maybe I do have the skills to actually do this long term.
So what were you saying? Sorry, you said that the companies were sub 100 NRR, and then you kind of took that on, and so that means that they were basically churning. They were churning. They were not keeping the customers that they had. And over what sort of time frame is that? Are those metrics measured in? Is it by month? Is it like per quarter, by year?
Great question. It depends on your business model. So a lot of PLG companies, that stands for product led growth. So it's kind of like, think about Spotify, right? You don't talk to a Spotify sales rep, you can buy their premium plan and just let it rip. So if you have like monthly contracts or auto renewing monthly contracts, you'll measure it on a monthly basis. It's definitely on a quarterly basis as well. But if you have more annualized contracts and you have like a sales team where you do sales led go to market strategies, you'll look at that likely on an annualized basis, but knowing that you do look at it every quarter as well. But you'll do, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. You'll do the year-over-year look back, and then you'll have your final 2024, 2025 NRRs. So that's how you measure those ones.
Got it. Got it. And before you started Success to Scale, which I know for you is like a very new venture, and we're going to get into that. You worked with companies at obviously various stages. Was there like a defining moment when you knew you had to also like strike out on your own?
It kind of happened by accident. I've always been really plugged into the customer success community. There's a really solid community over here in Atlanta where I'm based out of. And as I just continued moving throughout my career, I had more and more people, whether it was founders or actual VPs or chief customer officers, coming in asking my opinion on, hey, like, we're dealing with this. What would you do with this? Or how would you approach this different scenario? And that was happening often enough to where I was like, maybe there is something here where I can actually turn this into a full-time gig. And so jumped off that cliff a couple weeks ago, and we'll see what happens.
And when you mentioned that they were asking you about like your advice for certain scenarios, how would they like reach out to you? Was it because you were posting a lot on LinkedIn? Do you have like a strong community base? How would they actually find you to ask you those questions?
Yeah, either through LinkedIn is one. There's an Atlanta customer success community, which has regular meetups, which I go to as well. And then I just really enjoyed being kind of involved in some of the VC and PE firms that are local to here. So there's a lot of local tech events that I just pop up into because I just enjoy technology, honestly. And just throughout just normal networking and talking, people are like, hey, I'm dealing with this. Like, have you dealt with X, Y, or Z? And a lot of times it was, yeah, I've dealt with that, and here's what not to do.
Oh, and would you be talking to other, like the heads of CX of those companies that attend these meetings, or would it be like founders, or who would be like that demographic?
It's really all over, right? I've had lots of founder-led conversation. I've had a lot of conversation with heads of customer success, customer support, customer experience. And I mean, even right, like the CSM who's, hey man, I'm the only person here. Like, everything's on fire. What the heck do you do? Like, how do you prioritize this stuff? Right? Like, that's also a very difficult role to be in.
Oh man, I could totally imagine, because I know like basically that's like after the founder is talking with all their customers, handling all the support to like inform their product. That's when they hire their first CSM, and they're like, "What's going on?" So you've probably been in that position.
Go fix everything.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that being very, very challenging. So, who were some of the key mentors or influences in your career that shaped your approach to customer success and support?
Yeah, I had a lot of great mentors coming up. So the CEO of Hull was the company's name is Stefan. He gave me a ton of room and opportunity to grow and experiment and figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. And, just giving people the opportunity to fail fast and not being like, you are a failure, but hey, we now know a way that we don't need to do something. That was huge that he just gave me the opportunity to grow like that. Moving into my SaaS Optics career, one of the co-founders of SaaS Optics, Clayton Whitfield, just such a genuinely good person. And he just genuinely cares about you doing well and really helping you do the best. And then Chad Estes was the VP at SaaS Optics and Maxio that I worked under for a long time. And again, it was giving me the opportunity to grow and learn and try and experiment. And really just having my back in terms of saying like, hey, you can do this, go for it. Just understand that you have to report on the outcomes. And they just give me the leeway and the support to experiment was just massive for me.
I think that's actually something that was very unique, because unless you have, like, you do need a bit of like almost support to on your end to be like, yes, I can go do this, because you're very scared at that stage. You're like, what if I do? What happens if I mess up, right? So.
Yeah, because the customer might be emailing the founder at that point, right? Because the founder's been doing support. So if you screw up, guess what it's going to? It's going to the founder.
Yeah. But that's like kind of their baby in the beginning. So every interaction counts.
Absolutely.
Looking back, what's one lesson from your early days that you wish you could teach every SaaS founder today?
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Like, yes, you want to put your best foot forward. Yes, you want the perfect process. Yes, you want to make sure you have every angle covered off, but good enough is just good enough, right? Like, there's going to be too much stuff going on throughout time, especially if you're the founder and you're working on that startup and moving into scale up. It's going to be controlled chaos every day. So you can either spend 12 months perfecting a process, by which point it's outdated, or you say, hey, let's get something stood up in the next 60 days and let's see if it'll work. Have your metrics to track if it is effective, but good enough is just that, good enough. If there's too much chaos. Once you're Fortune 500, yeah, have your process, have 12 months to roll it out. But if you're a startup or scale up, like, let's just go.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of shoot from the hip and make sure that you're at least moving forward every day, right? Like, I think mistakes are okay. Like, most people get it, but it's being like kind of too afraid to do anything that really sets people back, right?
Yep.
So in the early stages of SaaS startup, founders often wear multiple hats, including customer success, customer support. When should they start thinking about professionalizing support? And is there a risk of waiting too long?
There's absolutely a risk of waiting too long. Absolutely, there's a risk to waiting too long. I will pose it this way. I'll kind of pose a question potentially back to you, which is, think back to your best support experience you ever had. Can you think of that company off the top of your head? Maybe, maybe not.
Probably not. Right. Maybe Amazon, because it was just so seamless.
Yep, but it's like, okay, you had to think about it, right?
Yeah, I
but
have to think about
the
it.
last
Yeah.
time you had a bad customer support experience. How quickly does that
Oh
one
my
pop in your
God.
head?
That I do know. That I know right off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
All these
So if you're the
third-party travel
founder,
sites. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're the founder and you're having to deal with board meetings, prepping for fundraising, you're going to also probably be helping out with sales. You're leaning into marketing. You also are helping out the product roadmap. And then you have all your customers for customer support issues coming into your inbox. You might miss one or two of those. And all of a sudden you have a ticked off customer who's going to be they're going to remember you ignoring them and not getting back to them because you have 59
Yep.
other things on your plate, right?
Yep.
It's so easy to lose that trust, but it's so hard to gain. And so it only takes one or two missed tickets to just ruin a relationship. So why do you want to inject that level of risk into your business when you've already done the hard part, which is getting them in the door? Retaining them and supporting them should not be the hard part there. But if you're going to be the roadblock to giving up the keys to the support kingdom, you might have a problem eventually, right? Because again, it's way easier to remember a poor support interaction than it is to be a positive support interaction.
Got it. That makes sense. And when do you think, like, is there a certain metric or a certain amount of like tickets or requests that the founder is getting on a daily or weekly basis when you think there's like the cutoff point for people to start like either having their first hire or building systems around support?
Great question. I think that it's going to depend on how technical your product is. Like if it's a relatively straightforward product, you can probably hang on a little bit longer. But if you're going to have a more technical product where it's going to take a couple hours to investigate a question and get it turned around and potentially have to look at, is this a bug? Is this going to be a patch fix? Things like that. Again, your time as a founder is largely better spent on making sure that the business is running effectively than answering a single support ticket that might take you 3 hours from the front line of things that are more likely to generate more revenue.
Got it. And do you think that like what should be that first action for let's say a more technical product? Should it be like, let's hire a first person whose full job is like sitting here and answering these and building the systems, or is it getting a chatbot? Like, what would be your recommendation?
I'm not a huge fan of early chatbots because the chatbots are only as good as the knowledge base behind them that it trains upon. And again, if you're earlier stage or in the scale up stage, if you're doing 2-week sprints or monthly releases, you have to make sure your knowledge base is updated and make sure that there's no conflicting information across those every single 2 weeks or every single month. Again, it becomes a massive time sink, especially if you're a founder or even if you're a product manager responsible for it, it's a massive time sink. So I think when you're looking for your first hire, you got to find somebody with that drive. The resume is fine, understanding the industry is fine, but if you're the first hire in the door, like you have to have that. I don't care what time it is. I don't care how much investigation I want to do. Like, I want to keep working until I figure out this issue. And that's the number one thing you have to find that first hire is like, they have to have that drive of like, this is going to be mine. Like, these support tickets are mine. Founder, it's your company, but this support org is mine. And you find that and you'll probably be okay.
So getting like that, I think Jocko Willink has like that extreme ownership. Like they have to have like the full ownership over the support function.
Yep, absolutely.
And obviously, you probably experienced this, but startups are very often tempted to prioritize growth over support. If you were advising a founder, what would you say? Like, focus on the customer, or focus on the product? I think that's a bit of like a hard question to navigate. But what would you say to that?
It's a yes, both, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is you can't grow your way to $100 million business without renewing somebody along the way. And if you don't have a good customer experience after a contract signing, you're never going to get the renewal rate you need in order to get that next round of funding or that valuation that you're looking for. Maybe you don't want to sell.
Well, Jahad, that's my editor. By the way, get that quote he just said there. I like that. You can't get, what would you think? You can't get to 100 customers or something without getting them to renew.
Yeah, you can't get to 100 million without renewing somebody in the process, right?
I like that. That's true. So
I think it's,
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's one of the situations where, yes, growth is important, but responsible growth is what people want to see. I mean, especially in the current funding environment that we have right now. If you're a GRR, again, like the customers you have on board, if you're not renewing them, VC and PE firms will look down on you for that. If you don't have a solid GRR, your valuation will get suppressed. And so, yeah, you can have a great growth rate, but if your rule of 40 is out of sync, you're not going to get the valuation you want. So you have to make sure that you do both at the same time. It's not a one or the other. It's literally both at the same time. You just kind of have to figure it out.
So kind of like as you're growing to a certain extent, right, through these sprints or whatever, you're getting more customers in. You have to make sure that like you have the ecosystem to be able to support them effectively and keep them before you go to that next sprint, or else then you just kind of have like a bad foundation and then eventually it will sink, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Word of mouth is generally seen as positive. Oh, I got referred to you by T-Bass, and this is great. Like, Paul, you've done such a great job. I heard Steve say great things about you. The same cuts for bad experiences as well. Man, this company sucks. I raised a support ticket. They didn't get back to me for 3 days, and they still didn't even resolve the issue. It's like, oh, maybe I don't want to go talk to those people, right?
I'm actually right now, I'm pissed at Asana because I was trying to get on their support team for so long. And then they got it. They didn't resolve my issue. And then I would never use Asana again because of that. They really screwed that up at that time. So I know, and I remember that. I remember that to this day.
Yeah.
And I won't forget it. Yeah.
And now everybody who's listening to this podcast now understands that you're not a fan of Asana. That's probably not going to help their go-to-market strategy, right?
No, Asana, if you want to fix your strategy, contact Talent Trellis. I'll help you out.
Great plug.
So, automation, as we talked a little bit earlier, is a big buzzword in early SaaS. And I think like chatbots are, I think that's different now. It's like large language model chatbots. Like that's like a new thing that's like kind of implementing. But are they a blessing, a curse, or just a way to fake being bigger than you are? Like, what is your opinion about LLM model chatbots and their like, I guess their position or their whole use case within these organizations?
I think for a vast majority of organizations, it'll be a positive. I think that there will be some organizations that try to be slick with it and it becomes detrimental. And what I mean by that is if, let's say I'm a founder, maybe I'm a CFO, I have to run the numbers, right? It's a business at the end of the day. I got X amount of dollars to deploy it. I don't have unlimited budget, right? And so if you're doing the math and saying I can hire 5 support reps at $500,000 after benefits, taxes, the whole 9 yards, or I can pay $200,000 for a chatbot, well, that's a $300K savings per year that I can go then deploy into other things, which is fine. But then chatbots aren't going to be good at some of those colloquial things, right? Like maybe I say MRR or ARR, but it views it as something else other than a SaaS metric, right? Or hey, I have a question. My last ticket said this, but I did this. Is that chatbot going to be able to then go look at the last ticket, understand what happened that last ticket and then take the findings from that ticket and deploy it into the current ticket like a human could. I don't think we're there yet. So I think that it's going to be great for kind of like first or second tier support, but I think that ultimately you're still going to need that human aspect of being able to jump on a phone call, jump on a Zoom meeting to try to de-escalate certain situations. Or I mean, sometimes if you have a technical product, like let's say you're in the fintech world, you don't want to be loading up customers' private financial information to then train the LLM, right? Like that's a really iffy scenario there. So I think that some organizations get it right. I think that some people are definitely going to screw it up, but only time will tell.
Yeah. And do you think that the introduction of this like AI into this in this whole industry, do you think it's going to like just eliminate a large portion of the CS roles, or do you think it'll just kind of like shift them into more like value producing positions?
I think it'll make them more efficient, right? It'll drive more enterprise value for these SaaS companies, right? If I don't have to spend, let's say it's even 5 minutes a day resetting a password for somebody, 5 minutes a day times how many working days you have times the rate you're paying them, like that all adds up. And so if I can take my current reps and upskill them into understanding more technical integrations, understanding how to write maybe Jira tickets or product suggestions, things along those lines, that's going to drive better enterprise value than them sitting on there waiting for somebody to say, I can't log in. Can you reset my password? Sure, I just reset your password. Like that, that's not a valuable interaction, right? Like if you can automate that, do that.
100%. Do you have any experience with these like large language model chatbots? Have you used any? Like I know like there's Ada, potentially VoiceFlow. Are they really that like expensive, like $200,000 or whatever?
I haven't priced them out like that, but I think that it's really going to depend on the throughput of asks, right? Because it's so expensive to run these LLMs, it's probably going to be the number of API calls you need to actually get it across the line. But I do know that, like I was talking to somebody who is, they work for a publicly traded company. They're currently working on deploying a knowledge bot for their sales organization. So they have to redo their knowledge base, and they're realizing that their knowledge base, which they've been keeping for the past 10 years, isn't even set up to properly be able to be ingested and read by an LLM. So they're having to reorg their entire knowledge base because it's illegible to the tools they want to deploy. So the AI can't even get there because it can't get out of their own way to make the knowledge base work. So it's
I see.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think AI is cool. It's a great buzzword, but you have to understand, again, it's only as good as the data you're putting into it.
And it's also like at the end of the day, if I'm frustrated and I'm trying to get something solved and I'm talking to this bot and it's like, I understand your frustration. Like, well, do you really
right? Like, I don't believe you. You don't understand. Like, no.
Yeah. No. And that would just frustrate me even more probably.
Yeah. But we'll see. Maybe if I come in hot and you tell me you're understanding my feelings, it's game over.
I know, right? So it's going to be interesting to see like what Gen Z and Gen X, what their experiences are with this.
Can't wait.
When your company is say under 100 customers, under 100 clients, is it better to be scrappy and personal, or should you build systems early to prepare for scale?
I always like being scrappy. When I was building out the CSM org at SaaS Optics, I was talking to Chad one day and I was like, hey, I'm gonna implement a CSP, a customer success platform. Am I implementing for a forever tool, or am I implementing for a get acquired tool? And he's like, in a get acquired tool, right? So it's good enough to get you going, but it's not going to be the end all be all for it once you scale past 50 or 100 million. And that's okay. You don't need to be dropping $50,000 on a CSP when you really only have 100 customers, right? Go get the cheaper one. It's okay. So I always like being scrappy. And again, like the issue with processes is that they're not set it and forget it. Like they're always living, they're always breathing, they're always being updated. So I don't think that even if you bought something for scale up now, you're going to have plenty of runway and time to get it squared away. Because, right, like, I mean, unless you just take off like NVIDIA, right? In which case, like, that's a different story. But you should have some idea. It's like, okay, we're at 100 now. The sales pipeline looks like we got 50 deals through the next quarter. So you should have that forward-looking throughput to say, okay, I'm probably going to be at X number of tickets, which means Y number of agents or Y number of processes needed. So I think I'm a fan of being scrappy. You can go professionalization after the fact, right? Like you can do that later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the biggest rookie mistake you see founders making when it comes to handling like their first few customers?
Letting the customers drive more of the roadmap than they should. And so this is going to be kind of a hot take, especially in the customer experience world, because like, yes, talk to your customers. Yes, the customer should help drive where you're going. But if you're getting started like earlier on, and I'm not talking about your first 10 customers, right? Like they should be helping you understand your product market fit. Like they should listen to them. But if you're at 100 customers, you can't just let the loud one like bring you away from what you're trying to focus on, because you have to remember that your customers are trying to get your tool to make them more money, make them more efficient, alleviate some pain point of theirs that they're experiencing. Like this is going to sound blunt, but like they don't care about your total addressable market. They don't care about your go-to-market strategy. So what they might be requesting might not fit into your TAM or your go-to-market. You shouldn't be necessarily developing that just because they're loud, unless there's a valid business use case behind it, right? And so that's where you have to figure out, is this going to be valid? Can I productize this? Can I sell this to more than one person? Or am I letting just the loudest person in the room distract me from the other 10 people who would love the same thing, but they're just not yelling at me about it?
That makes sense. I think that's probably a big issue because there's always like two or three of the loudest people, and they definitely draw up the most attention. And they're like the 80-20 law, right? Like they're the ones that just give the founder the most stress out of anyone.
Yep. They never give up that founder's email, I'll tell you that much.
No. What do you think are the best tools and tactics for startup founders who are handling support in the beginning?
Yeah, I think timeliness of response is key, right? Nobody likes to feel like they're throwing an email into a black hole. So even if it's just hey, got this, I'm in a couple back-to-backs, I'm looking into this as soon as I get out of this, even something simple as that could be huge, right? Where frustrations tend to boil over is from ignorance, right? I don't know what's going on, which is going to be frustrating to me. If you tell me what's going on, even if I don't like the answer, I'm more likely to respond positively to that, even if I don't like the answer, than no answer at all. And so I think being transparent and clear, and, don't BS people. Like, if you're not going to do it, say you're not going to do it. If something's down, just say it's down. Like, yes, there's different ways to handle certain situations, but be real, right? Like the genuine responses are what's going to get you further early on.
I think what one of the challenging things for founders is that there's like there's so much about like presenting like the best light and the reputation of the company, and you want to have control the narrative, control the perspective, because you're like at the end of the day, for most times like people take just appearance at face value. So I understand that part of it, but also I think you're right. There's also like, just don't bullshit them. Like they're your first clients. They know, like, just be real with them. They don't really care if like something breaks down or not. They just want to know like, hey, I you acknowledge it. I'm working on it, and give me an update. Right. That's really all anyone wants.
Yeah, but that's it, right? It's not rocket science.
Yeah. At what point? I think we may have discussed this earlier, but let's just kind of reiterate. Like, at what point should the SaaS founder stop being the frontline support person?
When you're getting pulled in too many directions, right? So if you're getting pulled onto sales calls, if you're still running the product roadmap, especially if you're kind of getting into fundraising mode, right? Because it's not fast or easy to fundraise. That's a big deal. And like everything else, time kills all deals. Same thing goes for fundraising deals. So when you're going through due diligence for a fundraising round, that's a ton of time and effort. And if you're not giving your time and effort to your customers, because again, you're trying to raise so you can keep your company going, it becomes difficult, right? So again, it's not that you have to have the perfect support org, but at some point you have to let it go, because you're going to miss a couple tickets, and it only takes a couple to get you in some hot water. I mean, think about the buying cycle now. Like, how many people go to G2 to look at reviews? How many 1 and 2 star reviews do you see which are related around support? A lot.
Yeah. 100%. So that's actually really good. So as soon as once they're getting pulled in too many directions, that's when it's like, okay, listen, like, because support, maybe even though they do think of it as a cost center, but it's kind of like that one spark that, like, if you don't put it out once in a while, it could turn to a giant wildfire, and that could then it's going to take your attention forever. Then it won't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a long
Have you
tail to
seen?
fix too.
Yeah. Have you seen that happen? Do you have like any horror stories regarding that?
I helped out with an org, and they previously had dedicated account managers slash dedicated ish support, and eventually they kept growing. And when you have dedicated support like that, for every X amount of logos, that's another headcount. That becomes very expensive and cost prohibitive once you're getting traction. But removing dedicated support for people who've historically had it is difficult. And so I had to help out an organization where they were going through that, right? How do you message that? Do you price as a premium product offering now, which is historically what is given free? Do you let them be grandfathered in for the free offering? Like there's just so many different variations of that again, once you give something away, it's hard to take it back. And it's definitely hard to
Yeah,
make it paid for once it's given away. So it's understanding those different levers, which has been interesting. We'll put it that way.
that makes sense. And as you know, like scaling support teams is tricky. So companies prioritize hiring people who like get the product, or is it better to hire for soft skills and then train them on the tech later?
Great question. I think it depends on your budget that you're looking to spend and what you want out of this person. So, right, you can either train soft skills or I can train the product. What I can't do is I can't do both at the same time.
Yeah,
That's not a way to have success, right? And so you have to understand, do you believe, like, yes, it's easier to have the industry knowledge, but is that mission critical, or is it better to have the soft skills and drive, right? So I think that enthusiasm, ownership, drive, like I can't necessarily train that per se. I can train you on industry knowledge. I can train you on process. I can train you on the product. So especially if you're starting, I would go for the people who have the drive and the want and the yearning to do more, who says, I'm going to bet on myself. Let me build this out. Let me come in as a support rep and let me run this all the way up to director level, right? That's hard to find. I can find people who know your industry. That's not the hard part. Finding the drive is the hard part because you need that grind when you're early in the support cycle.
and I think also like to add to your point here, when you're hiring, sometimes you could also like make the mistake of like this person's super experienced, he's worked with this and this company, he understands this. But sometimes like those people are so set in like their own processes and their own the ways that they've been doing things at the other companies, they try to like bring that over here. And most often SaaS startups, like I'm assuming there's like so much innovation going on, things are very different all the time. So maybe that kind of creates some like some disharmonies. So it's like as long as you have someone that's like tech savvy and has that drive, they can learn it because it's kind of like the idea of like when you someone with an empty cup, you can fill that empty cup. But if someone comes with a full cup, it's very hard because you keep fighting
Yep.
them against what they already know, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if the person's kind of like been there and done that, but maybe they're a couple rungs up from where they started, yeah, they had that experience, but like, do they want to go back and like rolling up their sleeves and doing the actual work again? Like a lot of people, once they hit to senior manager, director, VP, they don't want to go back down and answer support tickets, right? Like it's beneath them sometimes from their perspective. So that's the other side. It's like, are you actually going to want to do this? Or are you just trying to get in the door and then you're going to come in 2 months later and say, oh, I need to hire 4 reps. Like, then why do we hire you?
Yeah, 100%. So churn analysis is your bread and butter. What's the most shocking insight you've uncovered in a churn report, and how did it shape your company's strategy?
Whew, buddy. Great question. I think the number one was figuring out when that inflection point was in terms of churn. So, churn is generally, it happens. You might win them back in the future, maybe. But really, a lot of companies and organizations don't leverage churn analysis the right way in order to adjust processes moving forward to help increase retention. So, one of the churn analysis I did was I found out that the switching decision generally was made between 6 and 8 months away from the contract end date. So what do? We set the CSM in at month 7 to begin conversations about renewal, about additional value props, and about making sure that they're leveraging the system the right way. Because if you're engaging with them when they generally would be looking to potentially switch, it becomes more difficult, right? Because you then are basically assuming the renewal, you're using psychology or advantage and basically saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and set up this project. Let's do X, Y, and Z. And so all of a sudden you have that momentum moving into the renewal to where they're not going to look at another competitor because they already have things going on with you. And so leveraging the churn cohort analysis to figure out when does this decision be made, how is it made, and then rolling that into your proactive outreach or your support outreach is how you really leverage that the proper way.
Oh, okay, I got it. Just so if I understand correctly, you use the churn report to basically figure out where that inflection point is, where a lot of people are dropping off, and you use that information to like proactively start reaching out to them, opening the dialogue, and kind of guiding them through it. So that doesn't happen, or even fixing whatever it is and doing another analysis like a quarter down the line, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool because it was, if you looked at the year of data prior to the adjustments, it was 70% controllable churn, 30% uncontrollable. Uncontrollable churn is, hey, company went out of business, they're no longer there, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Controllable is the business can help fix that in some way. That next year after we implemented the adjustments, it was 30% controllable churn, 70% uncontrollable. Simply by adjusting when that outreach was happening and what we were talking about in that outreach. Complete flip of it. And it was a great thing to do, but if you're not doing the analysis, you're never going to know when to start doing that stuff.
Okay, so you want as much from this perspective, like you want as much uncontrollable churn, because that just means that that means like you're doing everything you can in your control, basically.
Yep, exactly. Like I can't help you if you go out of business. Can't help you with that. And VCP firms understand that as well, right? They're like, hey, man, all 10 customers you churned last month, they all went out of business. Okay, now that might open up a larger conversation of what is your ICP, ideal customer profile, and are you too far down the market? But that's a board level conversation about, hey, are we servicing people who are too young? Maybe not. I don't know, but that data can then help you understand that.
Got it. How can companies maintain the personal touch and customer success, customer support as they scale? And is it even like realistic to try?
I think you can try. You can absolutely try. I mean, ironically enough, like even when I was running a team of 16, when some of my CSMs would come to me, I would still remember the customer. I would still remember the key points of contact. So it's funny, like you can still maintain personalization. Now, it's not going to be the same level necessarily, but I think, again, personalization is great. Like, oh, you can have a merge tag. Like that's not really personalization. I think it's more like humanization, right? Talk to me like a human, interact with me like a human. I have enough of the AI chatbots being like, oh, I hope you're having a great day. It's like, okay, great. Like the form fill, whatever. Yeah. But be human. I think that like software is a people business. Like, yes, it's all about transactions, but like you sell to other people. People use your software. It's a people business at the end of the day. So just be human. And I think that that's sometimes what we're potentially like getting away from inadvertently. Like, yes, the throughput's great. Yes, the merge tag's great, but does it feel human anymore?
Humanization versus personalization. I really like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And how should the founder think? Let's say that we may have touched on this a little bit, but how should the founder think about removing himself from doing the support? Let's say we're in the scenario where they're getting pulled in 100 different directions. Like, what would be the best steps to take?
Yeah, get your hire in, get them trained up as well as you can, and then slowly start rolling away, right? I think that the most difficulty for founders is giving up the keys to the kingdom. It's not that they want to run away from it, it's that they have trouble letting go. And so it's getting that hire in and enabling that hire to do what they need to do in order to be successful, right? Like you can't answer every support ticket. You can't investigate every escalation, right? You have to let them do that for themselves. So I think that that's one of the key things. It's just, hey, allow them to do the work. So peeling it off, again, stop letting customers are still coming to your inbox. I get it. But at some point, you're going to have to start forwarding those tickets into the support queue because otherwise you're going to constantly get these emails into your inbox. And then let's say there's an escalation, but the only person who has the context is you because it's in your inbox versus in a system that more people can see and investigate with. So I think that's the hardest part is eventually letting go and saying, hey, I'm sending you our support team to make sure that you get the fastest answer and the best answer because I'm busy with 59 other things over here on the side. Understood.
That makes sense. Now I want to turn a little bit more to talking about outsourcing and customer support and kind of when does it happen? So in your experience, when do companies generally start thinking about outsourcing and what is like their best approach to do it? And what are like the key decision what are the key decision making criteria for when to consider this kind of move? Or when did it
Yeah.
get
So there's
thrown around? I guess like thrown around as a potential solution.
yeah. So I think that, if you're an American based company and you sell mostly to North America, you probably don't look at outsourcing that early. But as you start to have a larger global footprint, you want support to go with the sun, right? And so you have to make sure that you can do that. Does it make sense to hire, an American support rep to work overnight hours? We're going to have to pay a premium when you have less tickets, or can I outsource that? Have somebody who's just as responsive, but costs maybe a lot less. And that's okay because, again, I don't have the tickets that would dictate I need a full-time American to be doing it, right? Like you're paying a premium for that. Now, if you're enterprise grade and let's say you sold Samsung out of South Korea. Okay, great. Like hire somebody, right? Like hire somebody in that time zone so that way they can be fully supported. But so I think that global footprint's one. And then I just think that as you get more and more and more customers, by default, you're going to have more kind of tier one level type of tickets. Outsource those tier one tickets because, again, you can have your FTEs focusing more on the tier twos, the escalations, the bug investigations, the handling the upset customer. You can talk them off a ledge type of stuff versus doing password resets or adding a new user or things along those lines.
Got it. Got it. And I think we touched about it, but outsourcing customer support is often seen as like a cost cutting move. Do you think this mindset like limits companies from truly reaping its benefits?
I think it's a bad take. I don't think it's cost cutting. I think that it gets a bad rap because it's like, oh, they just did a layoff and now they're only hiring outsource. Like, okay, that does happen in that case, sure. But I think that ultimately at the end of the day, it's the business rationale behind it, right? If I don't have 50 tickets an hour coming in, it makes more business sense for me to have somebody working outsourced who is at a lower rate or is in the same time zone versus having somebody working overnights and still doing calls. I think that, yes, there's a cost cutting aspect, but I think that I know lots of companies who still hire FTE support, local, and then still have an outsourced team that works very effectively, right? Like as you grow, you want to make sure that you can support your customers. I think the other issue, not the issue, but I think the other aspect of going outsourced is, do you have certain SLAs that you have to meet, right? If you're going to have a 1 hour SLA, guess what? You better have somebody online ready to go. Doesn't matter if it's 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., 2 p.m., right? Like you have to have somebody available to meet that SLA. So I think that contract structure and global footprint are the two major kind of levers that you have to look at in terms of are we needing to outsource?
Got it. And do you think that, and the other thing is that at what general stage do you think companies would do that? Is it like when they're at a certain level of employees or a certain level of support staff? Or when is like their time when they discuss it?
I think it's either along the lines, I mean, probably if you're like Series B and beyond, Series B, Series C, like when you have some cash in the bank, when you have product market fit, when your go-to-market flywheel's working, because then you kind of have all the data you need to say, okay, if we increase by 100 customers, that means that we'll have 200 tickets, which means that's 8 hours of work per this one agent. So where does that make the most sense in order for that agent to sit? That's the type of math you can start to work on. And then, I think that's the major bit. I think that the other key aspect to kind of think about is, mostly Series B and beyond. I think that you can do it younger if you need to. But again, it's going to be highly dependent on what your training structure like. You can't outsource it. You have to make sure that you support your outsourced team the same way you would support an FTE almost, right? You can't have a 1 hour call with an outsourced agent and say, oh, well, they're not as effective versus our internal agents who went through a 4-week training period and 3-month ramp period. Like that's not apples to apples at all. You're comparing, 120 hours of training to 1 hour of training.
Yeah. So you would have to definitely like, before considering it, you'd have to also either have a very solid relationship with that BPO outsourced provider to ensure they can take on your training and do it. Or you probably already have to have like your training already built out, very effective so that they can just kind of replicate it over in whatever other country they choose to do that.
Yeah. And I've generally seen that happen around the Series B level where it's like, oh, we got 20, 50 million in the bank. Like it's time to like pour some gas on this fire. Like that's when you tend to start seeing that.
Okay,
That
so
level of
when you
spend.
start getting that funding, then they're like, okay, let's increase marketing, let's increase everything, and then probably we're gonna have to.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
We can buy LMS, Learning Management System, LMS. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. What are some LMSs? Do you know? Like, what's LMS?
I've seen a lot of hacked together, which is cool. So like you can do, what are some of the key ones? I'm blanking on the ones I used to use. Oh my gosh. I don't remember, but there's definitely more than a couple out there.
Yeah, no worries. Some founders, I think, also worry about like outsourcing will dilute their brand voice or reduce quality. Like, how can companies overcome this challenge?
I think it's a false challenge to overcome. Like just because you outsource doesn't mean it's detrimental to your brand at all. I think
That's
again,
what I'm
it's
thinking
about
as well.
it's using your limited resources in the best way to have the highest ROI on the deployed dollars. At the end of the day, like if outsourcing is it, that's it. Now, I think it's important to find the right outsourcing partner and make sure that they have like very good agents. Like if you hire a bad agent, yeah, your brand's going to suffer. But at the end of the day, if I raise a support ticket, I don't care what your name is. I don't care what country you're sitting in. I just want my stuff answered quickly and have it resolved on hopefully the first time. You deliver that, I could care less about where you're sitting.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think as well. Do you think there's like a perfect balance between in-house and outsourced customer support? And if so, like what would that look like?
I don't know if there's a perfect balance. I think it's always fluctuating. But I think that for your in-house people, you would want them to focusing on the tier 2, the bug escalations. If you have like a premium paid support feature, maybe they're on the premium paid support aspect because they're going to be in more product meetings. Like they're going to have to read the product release notes more. So that's potentially one aspect. But I think that, yeah, if you can outsource like the tickets that happen all the time are easy to resolve, or you kind of like know what you're doing when that ticket comes in, why would you have one of your more expensive resources answering that ticket when you could deploy that same resource to a better like revenue generating initiative?
Exactly. And what I found was like after you have this partner for a long while and you have their agents and they're working well, eventually they'll become like almost just as good as the in-house team, and you can promote from within as well too. And then you have like this solid base of people from other countries that are more cost effective that are performing these. I've seen that happen a lot with our clients as well. So there's definitely a lot of good pros to it.
There's room for both.
There's room for both, of course. I don't think one should ever replace the other. I think both are like very, very critical, but if it depends on the business and the business goal and the business need, like you said. So how do you think SaaS companies should evaluate potential partners to ensure they have a good alignment with their goals and customer needs?
Yeah, I think that you want to look at, do they have a track record of placing people effectively in other SaaS companies, right? So if you're a B2B SaaS, do they have other people working in B2B SaaS? Do they have other logos that you might know or at least are tangentially aware of? I think that you also want to look at, length of agent time and seat, right? Like if it's, hey, the agents are turning over every 30 days, probably not the best partner for you. If they say, hey, we have our agents and they stick there, they're there for 12, 18, 24, 36 months. It's like, okay, like that's going to be a good partner. That's somebody I want to look at. That's somebody I want to have a larger conversation with, because you're not just throwing anybody at my business. You're throwing people who are actually going to stick there and be there with me while I go through this stuff. So that's what I would look at.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You definitely want people who are like very committed, who have been there and who have a track record of being there, because otherwise, like if the churn happens, like we all know churn happens, like customer support is a very difficult field. So once you find those like A players, that you definitely want to keep them and make sure your provider has those as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as SaaS companies mature, the customer base gets bigger and more diverse. And how do you balance the needs of enterprise clients with like the rest of your users?
I don't think you necessarily have to treat them differently unless they need to be treated differently. So a great example is like I was at one of my earlier companies, like we were focusing mostly on SMB mid-market, right? So, maybe we had one customer who was over 200 employees. Nothing too crazy. But then we had, what was it? I think IBM came in inbound. It's like, that's a great logo. Would love to have IBM, but like they're so woefully outside of our ICP that it didn't quite make sense to spend a lot of time and effort on it, because we knew that the stuff that they would be requesting and what they would need didn't align with where we wanted to go long term with the business. So yeah, would the logo be cool? Yeah, would the money be cool? Absolutely. But it wouldn't have done us well for the long term health of the business. So I think that if you have the enterprise customers on, what makes them different? Is it just the spend, or is it that they have more technical setup? Is it that they have, different access to the platform that you have, right? Like, I think that that's more important than just, oh, they're enterprise, they have a lot of employees, right? Like, you can have 5,000 employees, but if you only have 2 users on my platform, that's the same thing as somebody who has 50 employees and 2 users on my platform, right? So I think that it depends on the technical need of enterprise, because they're going to have different requests, but you have to understand, where do you want to go with your business long term, and understand, if you want to move up market, then treat them slightly differently, figure out how you want to maneuver the enterprise grade support. Or if it's like, hey, we're happy with where we're at. If we get enterprise, great. If we don't, we're not going to lose sleep over it. Then you don't have to create a net new support track for them unless it's really, really needed.
Got it. And as we know, like as SaaS companies start to grow, they often layer on a lot more processes. Is there a point where support becomes like too bureaucratic and loses its effectiveness?
Absolutely. I think that you need processes as you scale. Processes help put the guardrails on the highway, but you don't want your team to hide behind process. I think that's where it becomes an issue. So a great example is I ordered something off the internet. It was missing a couple pieces, and the support rep's like, well, I can't replace them unless I have a photo of it. And I was like, how am I supposed to take a photo of something that wasn't delivered? But, well, that's our process. Okay, so as opposed to you helping me, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return the entire thing, and I purchase from one of their competitors. Again, the process has to be fluid enough, and your agents have to have enough, ownership to say, yeah, I know that's what the process says, but this is a better way to help the customer get where they need to go, even if the process says something slightly different. So I think that, again, it's back to that humanization aspect. Processes should guide us, but it's not the end all be all of, we have to do it this way every single time or else.
That makes sense. So you worked with a lot of companies during transitions like mergers and expansions. What's the biggest mistake companies make in customer support during these times of change?
Trying to merge support queues too early becomes real hard. But no, I think that especially with mergers and acquisitions, it's hard. And a lot of the time, the support agents are kind of feeling the brunt of it because they're responsible for supporting the legacy products. But then as you do the integration, as you build that umbrella across the new entity, it becomes difficult. And so you have to understand, do we want to cross-train our support teams over time? Do our net new hires need to be cross-trained on the entire solution suite? Or do we leave them as the legacy platforms and have our legacy standalone support teams? I think that eventually you have to make that decision, but I think that some people try to short circuit it. It's okay to leave things as they are for a little bit of time while you figure out what makes the most sense. I think that this is one of the scenarios where you want to do that additional level of planning versus just saying, hey, screw it. Everybody's in the same support queue. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean there. At scale, do you think SaaS companies should focus more on proactive customer success or reactive customer support, and why?
Again, I think it's a both. You don't focus on one or the other. It has to be both because they feed off one another, right? So if you're having poor support experiences, what's that going to lead to? An escalated customer. What does an escalated customer lead to? A CSM call, which is proactive, but realistically, it's stemming from people being upset with some facet of the support queue, right? Likewise, if you're reaching out proactively, which is great, if you're doing it the right way, you're going to uncover stuff that's broken that needs to be fixed. That's half the reason why you reach out, right? Uncover red flags and yellow flags. So you need to be able to close that loop between customer success and customer support. Like, we're all pulling towards the same goal. Yes, our KPIs are slightly different, but at the end of the day, like, let's get happy people and let's renew them. That's the name of the game.
Yeah. So it's just like working in that cohesive wheel like of the feedback loop. Yeah.
Yep.
So let's move on to, I want to talk a little bit more about leadership and strategy. So you've been in the trenches from the top to bottom. What's
Yep.
your leadership style and how do you get buy-in from your team for big changes?
Kind of player coach and trust but verify. So, I mean, I think that anybody who's worked for me previously would say that, I'll do the job. I've done the job. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I also wouldn't do, right? Like, hey, go take this escalation call. I've taken those. I'll still take those. I take those to this day, right? Like it's okay. But I think that, there's a lot to be said for actions speak louder than words. If you show the teams like, I'll go get blasted on the call. I'll go answer the support ticket. I mean, shoot, even when I was a director managing 16 people, I still jumped into the support queue every now and then to help answer support tickets when they got backed up. Like, you just have to be willing to like pull in the same direction and show that like you'll do it with them, right? Like, again, this is a team sport. SaaS is a people business. Be kind, be real, be human.
Yeah. Yeah. And customer support teams often deal with like really frustrated users. And how do you keep morale high during these, like when the going gets tough?
Try to joke about it. Try to just let it slide off your back, right? Like, it's okay. Like, I think at the end of the day, and I used to be this way when I was earlier in my career, I used to take it all, every bad CSAT was personal to me, right? It's like every breakup I've been through was every bad CSAT. But at the end of the day, like, it's not your fault. Like, you as a support agent, you don't control the product roadmap. You don't control how they were set up. You don't control what was said in sales. You don't control what marketing's putting out there. So like, if you don't control so many facets that lead to them getting to you, why would you take it personally? Like, listen, it's a business decision. It's okay. There's always going to be upset people. It's fine. Just don't take it personally. It's like, yep, go blow some steam off, slack somebody, go play a game of ping pong, whatever it is. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, listen, it's just they're trying to do their job. You're trying to do your job. They're frustrated. They're taking out because you're the face of the company, not just you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. Some leaders argue that like customer success should own the entire customer life cycle. Do you agree, or should support also stay in its lane?
Again, it's all pulling towards the same end outcome, honestly. So I think the implementation, customer success, customer support, all roll them up under customer experience, and that's what they should be, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're all about making sure that the customers have a good experience in order to renew them. Like, at the end of the day, like, that's what we have to do. This is a business. At some point, we're gonna have to sell this damn thing. So let's make sure we support the customers at every facet of their life cycle. So customer success can own it, but at the end of the day, like, we all own it together, because I don't work effectively alone. Support's not going to work effectively alone, nor is implementations. Like, we all three have to pull together to get towards the end goal of happy customers renewing.
Yeah. 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 So I think it's like back to what you kind of just said, is just they both have a place. They both have to work together in a certain way. So there's no one better than the other. That's why they both have their own place, right?
Yep. Spot on.
So let's talk a little bit more about the future of customer success, customer support, and SaaS. So as we know, like AI is transforming customer support. You think it's a tool for empowerment, or are we heading towards a future where human connection just gets lost?
The ones that do it right and the ones that do it well, it's going to be empowering. I think there's going to be a lot of people screwing up in the process, but I think that, again, it should be empowering. It makes you more efficient, right? Like, if I'm writing process docs, guess what? I can have ChatGPT or Gemini do a lot of the framework for me. It makes me more efficient to push things through so I can get more done, so I can drive more revenue. Like, that's what it is at the end of the day. So I think that if you do it right, it should be a massive help. If you do it wrong, you're going to be in for a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like a very common answer that I've heard. Like, but I think there's definitely it's like there's almost like an AI bubble. I think a lot of AI companies are just like ChatGPT slap-ons. So I think it's like going to be like a .com thing. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years with AI. Customer expectations.
Was it 2016? 2016, every tech company that was fundraising was blockchain, right? What happened there?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Who knows? Customer expectations are skyrocketing. Do you think SaaS companies are keeping up, or is there like a reckoning coming?
Is it that customer expectations are skyrocketing, or is it that we're not doing a good enough job keeping up with what historically the expectations should have been anyway?
Mm, I'm not sure.
And that's
What do
my
you think?
hot take. I, I think it's we're not living up to the expectations that we should be living up to. And again, like maybe this is just me, but I feel like customer support has taken a nosedive at a lot of organizations post COVID. I don't know why, but again, it feels like we've taken away the human aspect of support.
Yep.
Like, oh, yes, I'm supposed to tell you that I feel your pain and I understand your pain. Like, okay, great. But like, do you really? And is that valid, or is that just in your form response?
Yeah.
So, yes, some expectations are out of line, but I think that a lot of this is just, again, like we somehow lost our drive and passion at some point.
Mm,
And so I think if you can bring that back, I think that those are the organizations who are going to stand out. The best support organizations are the ones that they're not doing anything different per se. They're just doing it better than you are.
yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that's kind of like just a symptom of the way their society and the way things are going. Like we are it's super process orientated. Like let's get more and more efficient. Let's get more effective. Like there's no real like room as much for like creativity or a little bit of chaos in there that kind of would help with that empathy side of it. It's just like, okay, well, this is what you're supposed to say empathetically. Let's put that in there. But I think over time, people just like, they're like, they can just sense that. They can just sense that. And they're like, okay, yeah. Do you think is there one thing that SaaS companies are doing in support that will seem laughable in 5 years?
this might be a hot take that's going to come back and maybe look real dumb in 5 years. So we'll see what happens here. I don't love the idea of paid premium support. I see a lot of companies doing it, and I understand why, but part of me just doesn't feel right. It's like, okay, I'm going to pay for the fast pass so I can get to the front of the line for a support issue. I don't know if that's what you want to be putting out there. Like, yes, you want to service your customers, but like, if you're blatantly saying, hey, if you don't pay this premium support, you're at the back of the line, are you inadvertently making those people who didn't buy premium support jaded? And is that
Yeah.
what you want to be putting out in the marketplace? I tend to lean towards no, but I understand the reasons why.
Yeah, I see what you mean because it's like, well, I just bought the product. Now I'm a customer, and now you're like making me pay even more to be the support or yeah, fast. I see like that little bit of that little hypocrisy in there.
Yeah. So we'll see if I look dumb here in 5 years.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. If you had to bet on one trend shaping the future of customer success and customer support, what would it be?
Ironically enough, I think the pendulum's going to swing back to a lot more in person. You know,
That's exactly what I think too. Yeah.
last 5 years, yeah, I can do a ton via Zoom, but I mean, there's just something to be said for getting on site and just knocking some stuff out on site. Like, it's just different. Like, yeah, like we're talking face to face here, but if we're in the same room, I can tell a lot more of your body language. Like, we can have a much more candid conversation because I'm not worried about, oh, is my boss going to view this Zoom recording or whatever, right? Like, you can just be very
Yeah.
much more candid, and that's going to unlock more efficiencies than just, well, we're only remote and we'll only ever be remote. So I think there's going to swing back to in person at some point. I feel like it's
Yeah.
coming, but
I think it's coming. I think I 100% think it's coming as well because I think like it was good for the first little bit, all this remote kind of stuff, but then you're like losing that. You're almost like losing your ability to like interact with people at a very like minuscule scale too.
yeah, I mean, shoot, when's the last time you had to like do real small talk? Like that's
Oh
a skill you have to
yeah,
exercise.
it is. It really is. That really is.
Yeah.
So the very last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about a little bit more about your personal venture, Success to Scale. So what can you tell us about that? What are your plans for it? And how do you kind of hope to roll it out?
Yeah. So we've launched on LinkedIn. We have our website live, successtoscale.com. But realistically, I'm looking to help early to mid stage founders and customer success people get it right. I've built 4 or 5 different departments from sub 1 million ARR to over 50 million ARR. Like, I've been there, I've done that, I've seen it. And so one of my passions is, and this thing I write about a lot, is that people need to do these churn analysis. You have to make data-driven decisions. gut feeling is fine for a while. And a lot of my founders I work with, the churn stuff is, well, my gut feeling said this. It's like, you know your customers to a point, but you hit that inflection point, you no longer know every single customer. They no longer respond to those churn emails. And so again, it's doing the churn analysis, doing the churn interviews, and understanding what were those inflection points where we could have potentially saved them, and how do we adjust our processes moving forward to ensure that we don't have that same churn happen again. And that's really what I'm focusing on. Like, I don't want to make a ton of money. It's not a scenario where you need to spend tens of thousands of dollars. Have a quick engagement. If one or two saved logos pays for it, great. You're now playing with house money at that point. So that's how I'm trying to focus on it.
Got it. And I know you said early stage startup founders, but like, who would be like your specific demographic or like your specific ICP that you're trying to help?
Yep. So the founder who's just getting ready to say, hey, do I need customer success? Or maybe the person who's starting their customer success org on their own. Or just if you're hitting that inflection point of, oh man, we just got a big round of investment. Like, we're going to have to pour a lot of gas on the go-to-market strategy. How do we make sure that nothing breaks when we do hit that scale? And so really, if you're looking from like Series A to Series C, about 1 million ARR up to 50 is really where my sweet spot is.
Got it. Well, Thomas, we've been going about an hour, 5 minutes right now. And we've gone through all the questions. This has been absolutely great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot of value out of this. Do you have any final words or quotes you want to leave the audience with?
No, I mean, just thanks for having me. And for those of you who are watching, we are the weekend after McLaren winning the Constructors Championship. So as a McLaren fan, I'm happy, and I will end the podcast on that.
Let's go. And last thing, where can they find you? If they want to connect with you, if they want to interact with you, where can they reach out?
Yep. Reach me on LinkedIn, Thomas Bass, T-Bass, or successtoscale.com. I'm on both of those.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, and hope to have you on again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Great chatting.